The silence out here wasn't really silent, a fact that grated on most of the crew of the Rust Bucket, but which I had always found perversely comforting. A constant, low-level thrum of the universe going about its business. As a xenolinguist specializing in dead and theoretical dialects, I was more accustomed to listening than speaking, to finding meaning in the gaps between the noise, and the void of the Kepler Shroud Nebula was the quietest room I'd ever been in. That is, until we found the cathedral. We'd been on a deep salvage run, chasing whispers of a pre-Covenant warship that had supposedly gone down with a hold full of rare Earth elements. But what we found was something else entirely. It wasn't a ship, not in any conventional sense. It was a structure, impossibly large, latticework of crystalline material and obsidian-like alloy that seemed to drink the starlight around it. It drifted dead in the heart of the nebula, unmarked on any star chart, ancient and utterly inert. Captain Eva Rostova, a woman whose pragmatism was as sharp and unyielding as the recycled metal of her prosthetic arm, saw only tonnage and scrap value. Her first officer, a hulking ex-Marine named Jax, saw a potential fortress or a tomb. But I heard it. From the moment our long-range sensors got a solid lock, I felt it more than heard it. A subsonic hum that vibrated in my teeth and made the very marrow of my bones feel like a tuning fork. Our audio sensors picked up nothing. The ship was a ghost on all frequencies, yet the resonance was undeniable. A single, impossibly sustained note that felt older than language itself. We docked, our magnetic clamps groaning as they found purchase on the alien hull, and for 3 days, the crew cut and blasted their way through outer layers, finding nothing but inert material. No power, no life signs, no data. They called it a dead end, a cosmic paperweight, but the hum grew stronger the deeper they went. And I knew they were wrong. I convinced Eva to let me take a small team to the core, arguing that if there was a bridge or a command center, its data cores would be worth more than the scrap metal of the entire structure. She agreed, not because she believed my theories about the resonance being a form of dormant communication, but because the potential payout of a pre-Covenant data archive was too astronomical to ignore. So I went in, flanked by Jax and 2 other security grunts, our helmet lights cutting feeble paths through corridors that felt less manufactured and more grown. Their sweeping, vaulted architecture the reason the crew had nicknamed it the Cathedral. The air, once we established a breathable atmosphere, was cold and sterile, smelling of ozone and something else, something metallic and vaguely organic, like old blood or dried sap. The hum was a palpable presence now, a pressure against my eardrums. And while the others complained of headaches and nausea, I felt a strange sense of clarity, as if the sound was sweeping the cobwebs from the corners of my mind. It wasn't just a note anymore, it was layered, complex, a symphony of frequencies so low they were on the edge of perception. I set up my acoustic analysis equipment in a vast central chamber, a space so large our lights couldn't find the ceiling. At its center stood a pillar, not of metal or crystal like the rest of the structure, but of something that looked like petrified wood, covered in spiraling grooves that were mathematically perfect. This, I knew, was the source. Jax grumbled about the futility of it all, his hand never straying far from the pulse rifle slung over his shoulder. He trusted impacts and energy readings, things you could measure and shoot. He didn't trust a sound he couldn't properly hear, a feeling that made the hair on his neck stand up. I ignored him, focusing on the wave patterns coalescing on my screen. They were intricate, repeating, with nested symmetries that looked less like random noise and more like syntax. It was a language, I was certain of it. A language of pure vibration. For hours I worked, isolating threads of the symphony, trying to find the fundamental frequency, the root key of the entire composition. The others grew restless, their patience worn thin by the oppressive silence and the unnerving thrum that I was so captivated by. It was Jax who finally snapped. "That's it. Thorn, we're done here. There's nothing but a weird headache in this place. Pack it up." He took a step toward my console, but as he did, I found it. A single, pure tone, buried deep beneath the others. The foundational note upon which the entire symphony was built. Without thinking, I isolated the frequency and routed it through my suit's external speakers, amplifying it, singing it back to the pillar. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The silence felt absolute, the hum from the pillar vanishing as if it had never been there. Jack smirked, a triumphant and condescending expression. "See nothing." But he was wrong. The silence was the deep breath before the choir begins. A soft, blue light began to emanate from the grooves in the pillar, tracing the spiraling patterns from the base to the unseen top. The light wasn't electric. It was soft, organic, and it pulsed in time with my own heart. Then the sound returned, but it wasn't the monotonous hum from before. It was music, a chorus of voices, both melodic and impossibly alien, filled the chamber, seeming to come from the very walls around us. It was a sound that was both heartbreakingly beautiful and deeply terrifying, a song of immense power and profound sorrow. The floor beneath us began to vibrate, not with the low thrum of before, but with a new energy. A feeling of immense machinery stirring from a million-year slumber. The lights in our helmets flickered and died, plunged into darkness save for the ethereal blue glow of the pillar, which now cast dancing shadows that looked like giants waking from sleep. Over the comms, the two security grunts were screaming, their voices tight with panic. Jax was shouting my name, his words laced with a fear I had never heard from him before. But I couldn't answer. I was paralyzed. Not by fear, but by awe. The music wasn't just in the air anymore. It was inside my head. It was more than a song. It was information, a torrent of it. Images, emotions, concepts for which I had no words. I saw galaxies being born in fire and sound. I saw cities of light woven from harmony. I saw a civilization that didn't build machines but composed them, that didn't write laws but sang them into being. They were called the architects, and their language was the fundamental vibration of the universe itself, the music of the spheres made manifest. And I saw their enemy. It wasn't a creature or a fleet of ships. It was a counter-vibration, a dissonance, a sound that unraveled creation, a cacophony that devoured light and life. It was a silence that screamed. The cathedral, I realized, wasn't a ship or a tomb. It was a failsafe, a repository of the architect's song, a seed of their language hidden away in the quietest corner of the galaxy, waiting for a voice that could hear its note and sing it back. The pillar in front of me wasn't petrified wood. It was the vocal cord of a sleeping god, and I had just woken it up. I felt a sharp pain in my head as the flood of information intensified, the alien syntax of the architect's song trying to overwrite my own human thoughts. I could feel the ship, the cathedral, connecting with me, seeing me as the catalyst, the tuner who had struck the first chord. It was looking for a conductor, a voice to guide its symphony, and it had found mine. Then came the final piece of the transmission, the one that made my blood run cold. The song the cathedral was now singing, the grand sweeping anthem that was causing the very fabric of the nebula to resonate, wasn't just an awakening. It was a broadcast, a declaration. It was shouting into the void. We are here. We remember. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that something else was out there in the great, dark silence. and it had been listening for this song for a very, very long time. The dissonance was coming. Jax finally reached me, his heavy gauntlet grabbing my shoulder and shaking me hard. "Thorn, what did you do?" he roared, his voice barely audible over the celestial choir. I turned to look at him, the blue light of the pillar reflecting in my wide eyes. I opened my mouth to tell him, to explain the impossible truth of what I had unleashed, but the words that came out were not my own. They were resonant, melodic, a single, perfect note that hung in the air between us, and as I spoke it, the light from the pillar flared, and I felt the entire cathedral lurch, not through space, but through some other dimension, folding reality around us as it prepared to move. We weren't salvagers on a derelict anymore. We were passengers on a vessel that had just set a course for a war as old as time, and I was the unwilling navigator. The universe folded. There is no other word for it. It was not the familiar, gut-wrenching lurch of a warp jump or the clean, sterile snap of a slipstream entry. It was a cessation of all known physics, a moment of absolute non-existence. The celestial choir in my mind reached a crescendo that was not a sound but a state of being, and for an instant, I felt my own atoms unspool and rethread themselves in a new pattern. One moment, Jax's terrified face was inches from mine, illuminated by the pillar's cool blue light. The next, a violent, prismatic glare flooded the chamber, forcing us all to shield our eyes. The music shifted from a grand anthem to a soft, inquisitive hum, and the pressure in the air vanished. We were somewhere else, through the massive crystalline viewports that I hadn't even realized were there. A new sky blazed. We were no longer in the comfortable, dusty black of the Kepler shroud. We floated in the gravitational embrace of three suns, one a brilliant white dwarf, one a bloated red giant, and the third a pulsating neutron star whose rhythmic emissions painted the cathedral's hull in strobing waves of X-rays. The effect was nauseatingly beautiful, a sky of impossible colors and fractured light. Over the comms, I could hear Captain Rostova's voice, sharp and laced with an icy control that couldn't quite mask her shock. "Jax, report Thorn." What in the hell was that? Our navigation is non-existent. We're not anywhere on any known chart. Jax scrambled to his feet, his pulse rifle now aimed squarely at my chest. He did this. Captain Thorn did something. And this whole damn mausoleum came to life. I looked at Jack, and the world I saw was radically different. I didn't just see a frightened man in tactical gear. I saw the frantic, chaotic energy signature of his biosigns, the discordant hum of his fear, the staccato rhythm of his racing heart. His spoken words were a clumsy, gravelly noise compared to the elegant symphony of the ship around me. The architect's language was still flowing through me, a current of pure comprehension. The cathedral wasn't just a ship. It was a sentient musical instrument, and it had used the nebula as its resonance chamber to broadcast its awakening before performing a chord shift, a form of travel that didn't move through space but retuned its own spatial coordinates to exist somewhere else entirely. It had brought us here for a reason, I tried to explain, to bridge the gap between their reality and mine, but my own mouth felt alien, my vocal cords struggling to form the crude shapes of human speech. Instead, a series of soft, resonant tones escaped my lips. They weren't loud, but they carried an authority that made Jax flinch, lowering his rifle a few inches. The pillar's light softened, and on its surface a swirling star chart appeared, not of stars and planets, but of light and sound, a map of cosmic resonance. It showed our previous location, a single, clear note, and our current one, a complex citizen-shifting chord created by the three suns, and it showed our destination, a point of absolute, deafening silence within the system. Ava must have seen the display on Jax's helmet feed because her voice came back over the comm, stripped of its earlier anger and replaced by a chilling curiosity. Thorn, if you can understand me, what is that you're showing us? What is that silent spot? I focused, pushing past the symphony in my head, wrestling for control of my own consciousness. I was the conductor, not the instrument. I had to be. I raised a hand and touched the pillar, and willed it to show them, to translate the untranslatable. The chamber around us shimmered, and for a moment, we were no longer in the ship but looking out upon a planet. It was a dead world, orbiting the red giant at the edge of the system. But it wasn't dead from asteroid impacts or atmospheric collapse. It looked erased. Its surface was unnaturally smooth, its mountains worn down to featureless plains, its oceans filled with a substance that didn't reflect any light. There were the faint outlines of what might have been cities, but they looked like sketches that had been smudged into nothingness. The world had been unmade. The dissonance, I thought, the concept flowing into my mind with a feeling of instinctual dread. It doesn't just destroy, it silences. It takes the vibrant, complex song of a world and reduces it to a single, monotonous with its silent note of absolute nullity. A wave of nausea hit me as the cathedral transmitted the planet's final moments, not a visual record, but an auditory one. I heard a planet-wide chorus of life, a complex ecosystem of sound, suddenly falter, curdle, and then get twisted into a horrifying scream before being snuffed out into utter quiet. Jax stumbled back, clutching his helmet. God, what was that? I heard it in my head. Eva was quiet for a long moment. The enemy you saw in your vision, Thorn, this is their work. I managed a single, sharp nod, the effort costing me dearly. The cathedral's purpose was becoming clear. It wasn't running from the dissonance, it was hunting it. Or, more accurately, it was seeking out the places the dissonance had broken, seeking to repair them. It was a cosmic healer, a luthier tending to the strings of the universe, and we were trapped inside it. Why here? Eva asked, her voice steady. Why this system? Again, I touched the pillar. The perspective shifted, pulling away from the silent planet to one of its moons. The moon was untouched, a barren rock of gray dust. But nestled in one of its largest craters was another architect structure. It was a massive spire, shaped like a colossal tuning fork, its two prongs reaching for the stars. It was dark, dormant, but I could feel its song, faint and weak, a pure note shivering in the void, waiting to be struck. Another instrument, I whispered, the human words feeling like stones in my mouth. The cathedral is the choir. That is a new voice. It wants to wake it up. Before we could process the implications, a jarring, ugly sound scraped across the cathedral's resonant hull, like nails on a chalkboard the size of a planet. Every light in the chamber flickered, and the beautiful music of the ship warped, becoming sour and distorted for a moment. On the viewports, a shadow passed over the trinary suns. It wasn't a ship. It had no defined shape. It was a patch of mobile darkness, a hole in space that seemed to absorb the light around it, and from it pulsed a vibration of pure malevolence. The dissonance wasn't just on the dead planet. It was here. It had sensed the spire, too. It was trying to corrupt it, to twist its pure note into another scream of silence before we could awaken it. A new hymn began to build within the cathedral, deeper and more urgent than before. This was not a song of awakening. It was a song of battle. The floor plates vibrated with immense power being drawn from the neutron star, its pulsating energy being composed into a shield of harmonic resonance. I could feel the ship's intent. It was going to protect the spire, and it was going to use me as the focal point for its song. The pillar in front of me flared with golden light, and the grooves began to glow with intense heat. It was channeling its power, its voice directly into me. "It's a weapon," Jax breathed, his fear finally giving way to a soldier's awe. "This whole place is a weapon." "It's more than that," Eva corrected, her voice tight. "It's a statement, and Thorn is its mouthpiece." The wave of anti-sound from the dissonance entity hit us. It was a physical blow, a feeling of crushing emptiness that sought to extinguish every vibration within the ship, from the hum of the life support to the beating of our hearts. The cathedral's battle hymn rose to meet it, a shield of complex harmony that deflected the wave of nothingness. The two forces met in the void between us and the moon, and reality itself seemed to buckle under the strain. Light bent at impossible angles, and for a moment, I saw the rust bucket, still clamped to the cathedral's hull, ripple and distort as if it were a reflection in troubled water. I felt a surge of power course through me, an instinct I didn't know I possessed. The cathedral needed a conductor to focus its song, to give it shape and intent. Without a conscious will guiding it, its hymn was just a shield to fight back. It needed a voice. My voice. I stepped forward, placing my hands on the glowing pillar. The torrent of information, the choir of the architects, which had been overwhelming me just moments before, now felt like an extension of my own will. I wasn't just hearing the symphony, I was the symphony. I opened my mouth, and this time, I didn't fight it, I sang. A single, pure note of defiance rang out from the cathedral, a spear of sound that lanced through the void and struck the heart of the formless shadow. The darkness recoiled, writhing like a wounded animal, and the ugly, scraping sound it emitted intensified into a shriek of rage. It turned its full attention from the spire on the moon to us, to the source of the song that had challenged its silence. The crew of the Rust Bucket could only watch, prisoners in a choir loft, as a battle of gods commenced in the fractured light of a forgotten star system, with their xenolinguist, a man who had only ever wanted to listen, now screaming a hymn of creation into the face of the void, and the void was screaming back. The dissonance's shriek of rage was not a sound that traveled through the vacuum of space. It was a wound torn in the fabric of reality itself. On the bridge of the Rust Bucket, consoles didn't just spark. They bled corrupted data, displaying symbols that seemed to writhe with malevolence. Through the comms, I could hear the crew's shouts of pain as the anti-sound wave washed over them, not causing deafness, but a terrifying hyperacuity where every tiny hum of the ship's systems became a discordant, agonizing scrape. For me, inside the cathedral's core, it was different. The shriek was a direct assault on the symphony in my mind, a blast of pure, weaponized chaos designed to shatter the harmony the cathedral and I had created. The beautiful, complex architecture of the architect's song fractured, and for a terrifying moment, all I could hear was screaming static. My vision swam the golden light of the pillar flickering and turning a sickly, bruised purple. The connection wavered, and the immense power I had just wielded felt like it was slipping through my fingers, a forgotten melody. The shadow in the void pulsed, coalescing, its formless nature tightening into something more deliberate, more focused. It had been wounded, and now it was furious. It stopped attacking the cathedral as a whole and began a more insidious assault. It was looking for a flaw in the composition, a single discordant note it could exploit to unravel the entire song. It found it not in the ancient, perfect structure of the cathedral, but in us, the humans. It began to pick at the seams of our minds. Jax suddenly cried out, stumbling backward, his face pale. The siege of Cygnus X1. I was there. I saw them burn, he stammered, his eyes wide with a horror a decade old. A memory replayed with impossible fidelity. Over the comms, one of the engineers began sobbing, babbling about a childhood home that had been lost to foreclosure. The dissonance wasn't just a void. It was a parasite that fed on regret, on fear, on the tiny disharmonies that defined every mortal soul. It found the cracks in our composure and wedged them open, amplifying our private pains into a chorus of despair. I felt it try to latch on to me, whispering images of my lonely childhood on Mars, the academic failures, the quiet desperation that had driven me to the fringes of xenolinguistics. It whispered that I was a fraud, a nobody who had stumbled upon a power he could never truly understand, and that my fumbling would be the doom of everyone I had ever known. But the music of the architects was a shield. It was a language of pure structure, of cosmic order, and as the dissonance clawed at my identity, the cathedral responded. It didn't block the attacks. It harmonized with them. It took the jagged, painful notes of my fear and regret and wove them into the grander symphony. It was showing me that even the discordant notes had a place in the music, that sorrow could be a counterpoint to joy, that failure was simply a rest before the next movement. The understanding was a revelation. I wasn't just a conductor, I was a composer. I didn't just need to channel the cathedral song, I had to write my own verse. I focused, pushing back against the invasive whispers, and began to sing again. This time, it wasn't a single spear of sound, but a complex, multi-layered harmony. It was a shield song, a sonic aegis that I extended from the core of the cathedral, pushing it outward until it enveloped the rust bucket as well. I could feel the minds of the crew, their chaotic, frightened energies like a panicked orchestra. Gently, I began to soothe them, my song blanketing their individual fears, not silencing them, but lowering their volume, placing them within a larger context of hope and defiance. Jax's breathing steadied. The engineer's sobs subsided. On the rust bucket's bridge, Eva Rostova watched her sensor displays with a grim, focused intensity. She couldn't hear the music as I did, but she could see its effects. The corrupted data streams on her screens began to stabilize, the writhing symbols resolving into clean wave pattern analyses. She saw the dissonance's chaotic energy signature and overlaid on it a new, coherent energy field emanating from the cathedral my song. Jax, stay with him, she commanded over the comm, her voice a lifeline of pure pragmatism in the sea of existential chaos. Whatever he's doing, he's shielding us, but it's defensive. He's not attacking. She was right. I was holding the line, but it was costing me. I could feel the strain, the immense concentration required to maintain such a complex, adaptive harmony. The dissonance was relentless, constantly changing its attack, probing for new weaknesses. It was an unwinnable war of attrition. We couldn't defend forever. We had to awaken the spire. Ava, I transmitted, not with words, but by projecting the thought, the pure concept, directly to the comm system she was monitoring. It arrived as a burst of harmonic data, which her computer, now partially integrated with the cathedral's logic, translated into text on her screen. The spire. I need the key. She didn't hesitate. While I maintained the shield, she directed the rust bucket's deep-range scanners at the colossal tuning fork on the moon. I can't read its composition. Ari, she sent back, her fingers flying across her console, but it's emitting a constant, low-level resonance, a carrier wave. Is that it? Yes. The root note. I need to build the cord around it. The task was monumental. I had to maintain the complex defensive hymn that was protecting the crew, while simultaneously composing an entirely new song of awakening, one that was perfectly in tune with the spire. It was like trying to pat my head and rub my stomach while conducting two separate orchestras in the middle of a hurricane. The dissonance seemed to understand our intent. The moment Eva's scanners bathed the spire, the formless shadow surged, its assault intensifying. It abandoned its attempts to pick at our minds and focused its full power on a single, brutal objective, silencing the spire forever. A thick wave of absolute nothingness, a concentrated blast of anti-sound, erupted from the shadow and hurtled toward the moon. The cathedral's battle hymn rose to meet it, a wall of harmony against a wave of silence. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. The shield was designed to protect the ship, not to project that far and with that much power. I had to finish the song. Now, I closed my eyes, letting the symphony of the cathedral wash over me completely. I let go of Eris Thorn, the frightened academic, and became the voice. I took the spire's root note, a deep, resonant hum that felt like the sound of gravity itself, and I began to build. I added a second note, a sharp, piercing tone that represented the light of the trinary suns. I wove in a third, the soft, rhythmic pulse of the neutron star, a cosmic percussion. I added the themes of the crew's own minds, Eva's fierce pragmatism, Jax's battered but unbreakable loyalty, the low thrum of the rust bucket's engines, our own small, defiant song in the face of the void. The dissonance's silencing wave struck the cathedral's shield, and the entire structure groaned. The lights dimmed, and the music faltered. The shield was breaking. I had only seconds. I found the final note I needed. It was the note of my own humanity, not the fear and regret the dissonance had tried to use, but the curiosity, the awe, the stubborn, irrational hope that had led me to listen to the silence in the first place. It was the note of a salvager who had found not a wreck, but a wonder. I wove it into the composition, the final, crucial piece of the chord, and I unleashed it. The hymn of awakening erupted from the cathedral. It wasn't a sphere of sound like before, but an expanding sphere of impossibly pure music. It washed over the battlefield, bypassing the dissonance's attack entirely. It struck the moon, and the colossal tuning fork responded. A light bloomed at its base, a brilliant, silver glow that raced up its two titanic prongs. When it reached the top, the spire sang. It released a single, perfect note that resonated through the entire system. It was a sound of such profound order and clarity that it was the antithesis of the dissonance. Where the dissonance was a scream, the spire was a declaration. The wave of pure harmony washed outward, and the concentrated silencing blast from the dissonance dissolved, unmade by a sound it could not comprehend. The formless shadow itself seemed to curdle, its darkness thinning as the spire's song overwrote its anti-vibration. With a final, silent shriek of frustration, it recoiled, its form unraveling as it retreated back into the darker voids of the system, away from the cleansing light of the song. Silence fell, not the oppressive, empty silence of the dissonance, but a peaceful, reverent quiet. The spire on the moon now hummed softly, its silver light a new star in the sky, in perfect harmony with the blue glow of the cathedral. We were no longer a solo voice. We were a duet, On the bridge, Eva stared at her screens, her knuckles white. "It's gone," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and awe. "It's gone." Jax helped me to my feet. I was shaking, drained, the power receding and leaving me feeling terrifyingly small and human again. "You did it, Oris," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I looked from the pillar to the viewports, at the glowing spire standing sentinel on the moon. We had won. We had survived. But my relief was cut short by a quiet, persistent series of tones from Eva's console. "Aris," she said, her voice tight with a new kind of fear. "The spire. It's not just humming. It's broadcasting. And I'm picking up responses. Faint, distant, but they're there. Other spires, other cathedrals. They're waking up. You didn't just win a battle. You just announced the return of the architects to the entire galaxy. And you've shown everything out there, including the dissonance, exactly where we are." The aftermath of the battle was a silence more profound and unsettling than any I had ever studied. The dissonance was gone, a lingering stain of wrongness scrubbed from the local space-time, but the quiet it left behind was heavy with consequence. The spire on the moon hummed its constant, perfect note, a silver sentinel now in permanent conversation with the cathedral. We were a duet, yes, but the auditorium was the entire galaxy, and we had no idea who was listening. I felt the change in myself immediately. The torrent of the architect's language had receded, no longer a flood threatening to drown my identity, but a constant, flowing river within me. It was a phantom limb made of pure sound, a sense I had never known I was missing. I could feel the intricate workings of the cathedral as if they were my own nervous system, from the slow, gravitational pull of the power conduits drawing energy from the neutron star to the subtle crystalline shifts in the hull as it healed the microscopic fractures from the dissonance's attack. I could also feel the crew of the Rust Bucket, their biosignatures no longer chaotic bursts of fear, but a complex, interwoven harmony of exhaustion, awe, and deep, gnawing uncertainty. Eva brought the Rust Bucket into dock within one of the cathedral's cavernous, newly opened hangars. The decision to abandon the salvage mission was unspoken, but absolute. We were no longer salvagers. We were custodians of a miracle, or perhaps the harbingers of an apocalypse. The crew emerged, walking with a tentative reverence onto the glowing deck of the alien ship. They looked small and fragile against the sweeping, impossible architecture. Eva's face was a mask of hardened control, but her eyes, when they met mine, held a question she didn't know how to ask. "Thorn," she said, her voice a flat, grounding tone in the resonant chamber. "Status report. What are you, and what is this ship's intention?" I opened my mouth, and for the first time since the awakening, my own words came out, unbidden and clear, though they felt strange, like speaking a foreign dialect. "My name is Aris Thorn, I think, but I'm also the voice, the conductor, the cathedral. It's a locus, a seed of the architect's song. Its purpose is to find the other pieces of the choir and restore the great composition." Jack stepped forward, his pulse rifle held loosely at his side, his posture no longer threatening, but protective. "The great composition, what? Like a song. Everything is a song, Jax," I said, the knowledge settling into my own mind even as I spoke it. "The universe is a symphony. The architects were the composers. They brought order and harmony. The dissonance. It's the anti-music. It seeks to reduce everything to a single, silent, meaningless note. Total entropy. Total silence. My explanation was interrupted by the central pillar, which flared with a soft, inviting light. The star map on its surface dissolved and was replaced by a complex, three-dimensional latticework of shimmering lines, each one connecting a point of light. It was the network Eva had detected, a web of harmonic resonance stretching across thousands of light years. We could see dozens, perhaps hundreds, of nodes lighting up in response to the spire's call. Some were single, clear notes like the spire. Others were deep, complex chords like our cathedral. They were all singing to each other, a rising chorus of awakening. "It's a map," Eva breathed, moving closer to the pillar, her tactical mind immediately taking over. "But where does it lead?" As if in response to her question, a single point on the map began to pulse with a light brighter than all the others. It was a convergence point, the place where all the shimmering lines of the network met. The music in my head swelled, giving the location a name, a concept. The first chord. It wasn't just a place. It was the origin point of the architect's song, their capital, their genesis. It was a call, an invitation to a reunion that had been delayed for millennia. "That's our destination," I said, a certainty in my voice that felt both my own and borrowed. "That's where we're supposed to go." For the first time since this began, a flicker of something other than fear or shock crossed the faces of the crew, a sense of purpose. We had a heading. We had a mission that was grander than any salvage contract. We were part of something cosmic, a story that had been waiting for its next verse. The journey began. The cathedral, now in full concert with the spire, no longer needed to fold reality in jarring lurches. It moved through the network, riding the currents of harmonic resonance, a movement as smooth and effortless as a note carried on the wind. We traveled through the heart of blazing nebulae that sang with the energy of newborn stars and past the graves of dead galaxies whose silence was a sorrowful minor key. I spent my time in the central chamber, learning, exploring the depths of the symphony within me. The cathedral was a library as much as it was a ship. I learned that the architects hadn't been a single species, but a confluence of many, all united by their sensitivity to the great composition. I learned that the dissonance was not an external invader, but a schism, born from an architect who sought to control silence as well as sound, a composer who became obsessed with the rest between notes and fell in love with the void. But as we traveled deeper into the network, I began to feel something wrong. It started as a faint, sour note at the edge of my perception. A single instrument in the grand orchestra playing slightly out of tune. I tried to isolate it, but it was slippery, hiding within the massive swells of the Galactic chorus, one of the distant nodes on our map, a bright, clear signal that had been singing a joyful, ascending scale, suddenly wavered. Its light flickered, and its song became strained, discordant. Then, it changed entirely. The joyful scale was twisted into a mocking, minor key. The clear note became a grating buzz. It was still music, but it was wrong. It was like a melody that intentionally resolved on a wrong note, designed to be unsettling, to create a sense of deep unease. "Ava!" I called over the comms, my voice tight. "Put the Viridian Spire on the main display. Isolate its frequency." On the map, the node representing a spire in the Viridian expanse was now pulsing with a sickly green light. Eva analyzed the data stream. "The energy signature is stable," she reported. "But the resonance pattern, it's inverted. It's like a perfect mirror image of what it was before. I knew instantly what it was. The dissonance had learned. It couldn't overpower the song with silence. Not anymore. So it had changed its tactics. It wasn't trying to erase the music. It was trying to corrupt it, to rewrite the symphony into a cacophony. It was spreading through the network like a virus, not attacking the awakened architects directly, but twisting their song, turning their harmony into a weapon. We watched in horror as the corruption spread. Another node, a small cathedral-class locus near the galactic core, began to flicker. Its deep, sonorous hum became a high-pitched, agonizing whine. The network, our pathway of hope, was becoming a web of contagion. The dissonance was using our own strength against us. "Can you stop it?" Jax asked, his hand resting on my shoulder. I could feel the tremor of his anxiety. I focused on the corrupted node, the Viridian Spire. I reached out with my own song, trying to correct its soured note, to remind it of the true composition. But when our songs touched, I felt a shockwave of pure malevolence. The corrupted music wasn't just wrong, it was intelligent. It fought back, trying to latch on to my own harmony, to find a crack, a flaw, a single wavering note it could use to invert me as well. It was music that was mathematically perfect, yet emotionally void, cold and predatory. It was the sound of a predator mimicking a songbird to lure its prey. I pulled back, gasping. The connection severed. The effort left me dizzy, a phantom pain echoing in my skull. I couldn't heal it. To even touch it was to risk infection. The joyous reunion of the choir was turning into a trap. Every new voice that woke up was another potential instrument for the dissonance's mad orchestra. "We have to warn them," Eva said, her voice grim. "We have to shut down the network." "We can't," I countered, the truth of it hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The awakening is an automatic process, a chain reaction. You can't unring a bell this loud. The call has gone out. The crew looked at me, their newfound purpose draining away, replaced by the cold reality of their situation. We were trapped on a ship that was leading us into a galaxy-wide plague of corrupted sound, and every step we took brought us closer to the source of the infection or to another corrupted node that could turn on us. The pillar chimed softly, a single, sorrowful note. On the map, it highlighted a path, a route that bypassed the corrupted nodes we had identified. But it was a longer, more treacherous path, leading through dark sectors of the galaxy known for their gravitational anomalies and pockets of unstable reality, places the architects themselves had marked as dangerous. And the destination remained the same, the first chord. The cathedral was giving us a choice: retreat into silence and wait for the cacophony to consume everything, or take the dangerous road right into the heart of the problem, to the one place that might hold the key to restoring the original composition. There was no real choice. "Set the course, Eris," Eva said, her decision made. I looked at the faces of the crew, at the fear and the exhaustion, but also at the stubborn spark of defiance that had gotten them this far. I placed my hands on the pillar, but as I prepared to guide the cathedral onto the new, perilous path, I did something else. I focused my will, not on the entire network, but on the single, corrupted node of the Viridian Spire. I couldn't heal it, but I could do something else. With a final, focused blast of resonant energy, a chord of immense finality, I didn't try to fix it. I silenced it. On the map, the sickly green light of the spire shattered and went dark. I had severed it from the network entirely. It was a brutal, ugly act, like cutting off a limb to stop the spread of poison. The cathedral shuddered, a wave of palpable grief washing through its halls. It was a wound on the great composition, a missing voice in the choir, but it was necessary. I had saved the network, for now, but I had also proven that I was capable of doing what the dissonance did. I could create silence. The act left me cold and shaking, the echo of that forced silence a dissonant note in my own soul. We were on our way to the heart of the music, but I had just learned that to save the symphony, a conductor might have to be willing to break his own instruments. The dangerous road was a journey through the universe's forgotten alleyways and haunted attics. We rode harmonic currents through gravitational shears that warped the cathedral's crystalline hull into surrealist sculptures for terrifying, heart-stopping moments. We navigated a graveyard of temporal anomalies where we saw echoes of the rust bucket's own future and past, a ghostly fleet sailing alongside us. Through it all, the symphony in my head held true, a constant, guiding melody that kept us anchored in the present, while Eva's pragmatic commands and Jax's unwavering presence kept us sane. My act of silencing the Viridian Spire had left a scar on me, a quiet, cold note that now resided permanently in the chorus of my being. It was a constant reminder that the line between composer and destroyer was simply a matter of intent. The dissonance wasn't just an enemy, it was a potential I now carried within myself. After a journey that felt like a lifetime, we arrived. The first chord was not a planet or a star system in any conventional sense. It was a Dyson sphere, a colossal, intricate sphere of obsidian and light constructed around a stable, ancient white dwarf. But unlike any Dyson sphere humanity had ever dreamed of, this one was silent, utterly. As we approached, the vibrant and galaxy-spanning network of architect music we had been writing faded into a profound and absolute quiet. Even the constant hum of the cathedral's own systems seemed to be absorbed by the structure's perfect, acoustic deadness. It was a place where sound came to die. The sphere was a musical instrument the size of a solar system, and it was waiting for its first note in an eon. There were no defenses, no warnings. An opening, a perfect circle of darkness, dilated on the sphere's surface, inviting us in. Eris. Eva's voice was a whisper over the comms, a tiny, fragile sound in the crushing silence. What is this place? It's the concert hall, I replied, my own voice sounding thin and weak. The song begins here, or it ends. I guided the cathedral inside. The interior was a universe in miniature. The white dwarf at the center pulsed with a soft, steady light, illuminating a vast, empty space. There was nothing here. No cities, no control centers, no sign of life, just the smooth, black, inner surface of the sphere and the silent star. But I could feel a presence. It wasn't loud or aggressive like the formless shadow had been. It was a pressure, a patient and ancient consciousness that had been waiting in the quiet. It emerged from the silence not as a creature or a ship, but as a being of pure structure, a figure that looked like a man sculpted from solidified shadow and frozen sound waves, standing on a platform that materialized before us. He wore no armor, but his form was regal, ancient, and filled with a sorrow so immense it was a gravitational force. The voice returns. He communicated, the thought appearing in my mind not as a symphony, but as a perfectly articulated, toneless statement. But you are fractured, a human mind trying to contain a divine song. You sing with passion, but passion is chaos. It is the flaw in the composition. This was the source, the first dissenter, the architect who had chosen silence. He was not a monster. He was a philosopher. I offer you a gift, The silent composer continued, his presence exuding a cold, irrefutable logic. I offer you peace. The great composition you seek is a lie. It is an endless, striving, chaotic noise. Life screams, stars burn and die, galaxies collide. It is a symphony of pain. But silence is perfect. It is eternal. It is the only true order. He raised a hand, recede, and I felt the music within me begin to fray. He wasn't attacking it with anti-sound. He was deconstructing it, showing me the mathematical flaws in every melody, the chaotic randomness in every harmony. He was turning the beautiful symphony of the architects into a meaningless sequence of frequencies. The cathedral around us flickered, its blue light dimming as its song lost its meaning. "Eris, fight it!" Jax yelled, but his voice was just another random noise in the growing void. I tried to sing, to reassert the harmony, but it was like trying to build a sandcastle in a hurricane. How do you fight an argument? How do you sing a song to a being that has proven that all songs are meaningless? The composer's logic was a powerful solvent, dissolving my will, my purpose. He was right. Life was chaotic. My own fear, Jax's old trauma, Ava's grim determination, they were all discordant notes. Perhaps silence was the better choice. The cold note within me, the memory of silencing the spire, resonated with his argument. The temptation was overwhelming. Just to let go, to let the music fade, to rest. No, a voice cut through the silence. It was Eva. She had patched the Rust Bucket's external speakers directly into our comm channel. Her voice was unmusical, flat, and amplified into the vast, silent chamber. "You're wrong." The silent composer turned his featureless face toward the tiny, ugly salvage ship docked in the cathedral's hangar. A lesser harmony, a creature of fleeting biological noise. "You have no part in this." "The hell we don't," Eva shot back, her pragmatism a shield against his cosmic nihilism. "You talk about your perfect order, your perfect silence. You know what that is. It's a cage. It's death. You say our passion is a flaw, our fear, our anger, our hope. You bet it's a flaw. It's messy and it's stupid and it's illogical, but it's ours. That chaos is what makes the music worth listening to." Her words were a lifeline. They were not a perfect harmony. They were a statement of truth, jagged and real, and they sparked a revelation in my mind. The silent composer's mistake wasn't in embracing silence. Silence is a part of music. The rest is as important as the note. His mistake was in believing that silence was the goal. He had forgotten that the rest only has meaning because of the note that comes after it. I looked at the composer, and for the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a lonely, terrified God who had heard a universe of pain and had decided to turn off the sound rather than learn to live with it. I couldn't overpower his logic with a more perfect song. He would just deconstruct it. So I had to create a song he could not deconstruct. A song whose very premise was beyond his logic. I let go of the perfect, divine symphony of the architects. I let it fall away, and in its place, I reached for something else. I reached for us. I placed my hands on the pillar, and I began a new composition. The first note was the low, steady hum of the Rust Bucket's life support. The second was the frantic, loyal beat of Jax's heart. The third was the sharp, clear frequency of Eva's unwavering command. I wove in the memory of the screaming engineer, the fear of the security grunts, my own gnawing self-doubt. I took every flawed, chaotic, ugly, beautiful piece of our humanity, and I made it the foundation of the song. Then I did the unthinkable. I reached for the cold, silent note within myself, the scar from the Viridian spire, and I wove it into the harmony. I gave the silence a place. It became a pause, a moment of quiet reflection in a rising chorus of defiant life. I harmonized with our own imperfection. I was no longer just the voice of the architects. I was the composer for humanity. The music that filled the Dyson sphere was unlike anything the universe had ever heard. It was not perfect. It was raw, emotional, full of jarring transitions and unexpected resolutions. It was a blues riff played on a cosmic guitar. It was a hopeful prayer sung in a storm. It was a salvage captain's curse and a xenolinguist's awe, all woven together. The silent composer recoiled, not in pain, but in utter confusion. This is not a composition, he projected, his own certainty wavering for the first time in 1,000,000 years. It is noise. It is illogical. It has no structure. It has the only structure that matters. I sang, my voice now fully my own, human and flawed and clear. It's alive, my song, our song, washed over him. It didn't destroy him. It embraced him. It took his perfect and lonely silence and wrapped it in the messy, vibrant warmth of life. The figure of solidified shadow began to dissolve, not into nothingness, but into light. His silence found its place as the deep, resonant bass note in our chaotic chorus. The first chord had been struck. Light and music erupted from the Dyson sphere, a wave of this new, imperfect symphony that washed out into the galaxy. Across the network, the corrupted nodes did not shatter. They listened. The cold, inverted music of the dissonance faltered, overwhelmed not by a superior harmony, but by a harmony that had room for error, for passion, for life. The sickly green lights flickered and returned to their original, vibrant hues. Their songs changed, now with a new, more complex and resilient melody. In the aftermath, the sphere was filled with a gentle, humming light. The crew of the Rust Bucket stood on the deck of the cathedral, no longer prisoners of a cosmic war, but its unlikely victors. My connection to the cathedral was still there, but it was different. It was a partnership, not a possession. I was Eris Thorn, and that was enough. We had not restored the great composition of the architects. We had replaced it with something new, something stronger. We were no longer salvagers, and I was no longer just a listener. We were the first verse of a new galactic anthem, and the universe, for the first time, was listening to the music of humanity.